Okay, hello and welcome everyone to this webinar called Understanding Impact Assessment and Green Financing. My name is Jenny and I work at Ignite Sweden. So just some few house rules before we get started. As I said previously, this webinar is recorded, so please keep that in mind. And also please keep yourself muted outside of the dedicated Q&A sessions. And if you have any questions or if you want to interact in any way, you can use the chat function, and we will also help to moderate the questions along the way. So this is today's agenda. We will start with an introduction of the initiative called the Swedish Climate Startup Map, and also present the speakers. Thereafter, we are followed by a presentation by WWF, and they will focus on the role of innovation in the green transition and climate impact assessment. Thereafter, we will have another presentation by IVL, the Swedish Environmental Research Institute, and they will cover green financing mechanisms and state-of-the-art analysis. And thereafter, we will round off the whole session with our guest speaker, Helene Taflin from Almi Invest, and have a small Q&A session as well. So welcome to today's session. And the goals of today is firstly to familiarize yourself with the Swedish Climate Startup Map, to deepen your understanding of innovation in relation to the green transition. And we also know that this, like the green transition is not easy, it's very complex. So we hope that we can also provide you with an introduction to the tools and frameworks that are available, and also help to give you an understanding of how different actors in the ecosystem can use these tools and together come together and enable change. And lastly, this is also a great opportunity to join our community. We have a website where you can sign up to our newsletter, but also a lot of the communication is done through our channels at Ignite Sweden and SISP, which is Swedish Incubators and Science Parks. So if you want to stay up to date, please follow us on social media. Right, so I will jump straight into the Swedish Climate Startup Map. And this is a platform where we have gathered innovative Swedish startups and scale-ups that contribute to environmental sustainability. And this project was actually, the first version was initiated by Sting in 2020. And at that time, it was funded by Vinnova. And last August in 2022, there was another very big project called Omställningslyftet, where we're working in a specific work package. And then we got the chance to kind of redo this type of mapping of innovative climate startups. And today, this project is led by Chalmers Ventures, Dalarna Science Park, Ignite Sweden, LEAD, and SISP. And we are funded by the European Regional Development Fund, Tillväxtverket, Vinnova, and Energimyndigheten. So a brief timeline of this initiative. We have done 3 releases so far. In January, we had a pre-launch. Our real launch was in the end of March, which coincided with as part of Sweden Innovation Days. And the third launch was actually, or the third release was actually last week on Wednesday, where we welcomed an additional 58 companies to the map. And so presently we have 479 companies within various industries that are part of this platform. And the goal is really to showcase these solutions and these innovations that have the potential to accelerate the green transition. And the aim is to give them visibility in order for them to attract the needed support in terms of investment, customers, and talent. And we also wish to position this platform as the place to go where people can find Swedish climate startups, but also we see it as like that we have a role in making these companies more accessible to a wider audience and take the first step into understanding where in the climate space that these innovations are positioned. And we have also developed a screening process as part of this process. And I will hand over to Linda, my colleague, who will talk a bit more about this.
Yes, hello. So I'm Linda Hagman, and I'm behind the screening process, where we aimed to show a breadth of companies at the Swedish Climate Startup Map, which means that the startups that are chosen or selected, they have different roles within the society, and some may have a major sustainability impact and some have minor. But what we have assessed is basically the potential on different environmental sustainability criteria that different startups contribute to. And these are listed here, of course. And so what we demand in the screening process is that you fulfill at least contribution to one of these sustainability criteria. And then we have some other criteria regarding the scalability, the innovation height, and some hard criteria regarding, for example, number of employees and yes. And the evaluation team that have gone through a large list of startups, it's me, who has a PhD, and 3 master students who also have expertise in environmental sciences and systems analysis. So that's what the screening process to become part of the map is basically looking like. And now when companies apply themselves, we have a few questions that are more qualitatively written, and those are the ones we assess if they pass onto the map or not. Yes.
Thank you. And I would just like to briefly show how our search function. So this is a screenshot from the website, and we will share the link in the chat. So, and we have categorized all the companies according to these different topics. So you can really deep dive and find specific startup profiles that you are interested in, whether it be related to the maturity level or a specific industry, or if they're acting within or have a specific enabling technology, for example. So I urge you to visit our platform. And lastly, before we dive into our speakers' presentations, I just want to present everyone that made today's event possible. So we have Linda and I from Ignite Sweden, and then we have Johan Söderblom and Örjan Jansson from WWF, Andreas Englund, Nora Fischer, and Rebecca Lidman from IVL, and lastly, Helene Taflin from Almi Invest. So very happy to have you along with us today. And now I will hand the microphone over to the first speaker, which will be WWF.
Thank you, Jenny. I think that would be me then. I will share a screen here as well. Nice to meet you all. So this part of the presentation will be about climate impact and trying to put this a little bit in perspective. And one part is just to clarify the challenge we have with the climate a little bit, and then showing various ways to look at how you as startups and scale-ups can view impact and also the purpose is trying to, the more understanding you get, the more you can tweak and increase the impact, the positive climate impact you will make with your service or product. So that is kind of the reason why for this presentation. And Johan will, in the second part, talk about how to quantify the impact of your products and services, how one can do that. Okay, so just want to start out with the challenge that we have. As you know, we are kind of overshooting the capacity of our world. It started already in the 70s, where we started to take out more from Earth than it can really sustain. And you can see this overshoot is increasing by time, and that is not sustainable, of course. And also another huge problem, another way to look at it is the loss of biodiversity and wildlife. It has declined almost 70% from the early 70s. And that is just not possible to continue like this either. The UK government did an investigation analysis some years ago called the Dasgupta review, and stated that the GDP has really increased, as you can see to the left there, starting in the mid-century, 1950, and really took off, which has helped us immensely. But it's strongly connected to the degradation to the right of the biosphere. It takes a lot of damage doing this. So in one way, we could see that the last 50, 70 years has been the best of times, but also the worst of times at the same time. And you can see this pattern in many dimensions. To the left here, we can see how world population has increased, GDP, energy usage, telecommunications, transportation, and so on has just skyrocketed, which gives us a lot more wealth as a human being. But the Earth system takes a lot of damage in parity to that, in many different type of dimensions as well. So this is what we are doing, and that's what we need to change. Here's another way to look at this. It comes from the Global Risk Report from World Economic Forum, where they are asking a lot of business leaders in large corporations to rate the risks they see, the likely impact and severity of various challenges in a 2-year perspective and in a 10-year perspective. And especially in the 10-year perspective, there's a lot of agreement that our biggest challenges are connected to the environment, and the biggest risks for our economic growth and wealth. So this is something that is quite clear in that sense, and something we need to change. So one way to look at this, perhaps you're very familiar with these 3 horizons, but we like this because the red line here visualizes the business as usual, what we do today. We do a lot of unsustainable things today, or patterns you could call it. For instance, we have a lot of food waste. We cannot go on doing that. That's something that has to decline by time. And you could also draw the yellow line, which is a horizon 3, which is something we want to increase, which is the sustainable pattern or horizon, the way to live. I think we probably need to target to sustain 11 billion people and the planet and the nature in a good way. That is our vision, and we need to go there. But the thing is that there are difficulties to take steps to go from red to yellow directly. So there is a middle step, you could call it, which is the horizon 2, which helps us to transition from 1 to 3. And it is categorized by innovation to a lot of extent, to make things in a new way. And this is probably where a lot of the startups and scale-ups that you have today, you are here, are categorized into this category probably, and also perhaps the Horizon 3 as well. And the thing is to do this, to get take the biggest steps as possible right away, is to look for making the biggest impact, the biggest difference for the climate or for the other environmental dimensions. At the same time, we need to phase out the business as usual or what we're doing today, and remember that has to be phased out in a good way. Otherwise, that will hold us back. So I just think I just wanted to share this way of looking at it, and because sometimes you can hear that, okay, your innovation is not sustainable either. Well, it can be a very important stepping stone. And what we need to do is to become heroes of impact. That is really what can take the biggest steps forward. All right, another way to view this, what we need to do is what's called the carbon law. This is from Exponential Roadmap, and it means that for each decade we need to halve the carbon emissions, the fossil carbon emissions. So to 2030, that's the first halving we need to do, and then we need another halving to 2040. That's what we need to do in order to reach the 1.5 degree target, if it's still possible. So to reach the first halving, the IPCC has actually a plan. There is a lot of available technology ready to scale up, and they are cost efficient. It's less than $100 per ton of carbon dioxide emissions, the cost to actually reduce that ton. And it could be much less, like solar panels, wind power is really efficient, and there's a lot of other solutions in all sectors. So we really have that here ready to scale up. But the things that you are probably working on is more, will have the biggest effect probably to kind of 2040, to that halving. That's where the innovations and scale-ups of today are positioned, more or less. And we just put Ignite there that to represent all the Swedish innovations and scale-ups that we have today. So this is really important. We need to work on this at the same time. We cannot do either one. We have to do both. And to the third halving, we are more probably in research and development position for those solutions. They are even further away. Yes. So one way to look at yourself as a startup and scale up, where are you positioned? That could be important in order to understand how can I maybe move myself to an even more impactful company and have even more impactful products and services. One way to categorize a company, or actually an investment, if you take it from an investor's perspective, this is taken from Swedish National Advisory Board for Impact Investing, and they have actually really good material for doing this categorization. And kind of the companies or the investments with the most impact is the impact investment, that category to the right, where the main purpose for that company is really to create maximum positive impact. But there can also be sustainable companies which are really doing a big difference for the climate, and both of those categories are really good and important. And then there are two left ones that could do a lot better probably. So it can be interesting for you to look at where you're located in that scale. And when it comes to from an investor point of view, and Helen might explain more later on, when it comes to impact investment, which is a really growing type of investment area where you probably want to qualify. There are some criteria for this, because we can say that impact integrity is important. That means that we must, when we talk about impact and impact investment, we need to fulfill this criteria, because otherwise impact will be impact washing. It will be worth nothing, that word. So let's look at these definitions. It could be good for you to know about them. An investment or an innovation that qualifies for be called impact investment should tackle and prioritize problem, something important. It has to be able to deliver results, outcomes. And if you take a look at these bikes here, outcome is that you can the impact is that you can really lessen the climate emissions or carbon emissions by bicycles that replaces cars. It's not the number of bikes you put on the street that is an outcome, that is an output, that is action you do, but the real results is called the outcomes. Easy to mix up, I think. And your outcome need to be quantifiable. It has to be possible to actually measure it and quantify it, or at least assess it in a good way. Otherwise, it doesn't qualify. And there has to be a problem that is really needed to be tackled, that there are not plenty of solutions for already, actually. It has to have enough sufficient potential that it doesn't make that, so it can make a big change or difference. And this is a tricky one. It's called contractual improvement. So it means that the service or product that you introduce should really make a big difference, in that sense that it doesn't destroy anything else, that it doesn't make a bad impact on biodiversity or water usage or something like that. So it really have to have a net positive impact. And everything you do is complex, so it's necessary to be transparent with your assumptions that you need to make to assess your impact and so on, and try to be as scientific and use common knowledge as much as possible when you estimate this. Yes, this information can be found on this Swedish National Advice Award. I recommend for you to look at that one. But there are some of you that might think that, okay, we might not qualify exactly for that, but there are something classified as enabling technologies, which is helping others to create impact. And that is also super valuable. So good for you to know that there's such a category as well. And it can also be about eliminating or reducing obstacles that stops impact from happening at scale. That is also an enabling technology. And actually, if that's what you can achieve, you could be categorized as an impact company, even though you don't create impact yourself. You maybe have so-called output rather. But that's a very good place to be as well. Yeah, that's what I just said. I'm going very fast here and rather have questions later on. So some examples are if you're working on providing electrical roads, charging infrastructure, improved system for wind power plants. If it make a big difference on the impact of those products or services that are being enabled in this way, you qualify for this. Yes. Now I want to hand over the word to my colleague Johan to talk about how to quantify impact. Johan.
Yes, thanks, Örjan. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. We're not going to dig really deep into it, but at least explain it on an overall level, because as Örjan mentioned, a really important part of impact is to put numbers on it. And that's an exercise that is really good to do for everyone who is some sort of solutions provider. And we have seen a lot of initiatives on that throughout the years. There's different methodologies and different organizations that do this, but it all kind of comes down to the same basic steps. And this graph here that you can see on our slide, it shows the basic principles of it. So you more or less take the business as usual as a baseline, like what is happening today, and you compare the emissions that are happening today with the emissions that will happen after you have put your product on the market, which is the enabling effects, the yellow, the light green box here. So you compare those two the scenarios more or less, but then you also have to take into account the blue box there, the emissions from actually providing your service, or like maybe the factory emissions where you are producing your product, or the office emissions from your office and travels and so on. So everything, all of that goes into the blue box. I guess that's where you would do some kind of life cycle analysis to make sure what are the actual emissions from this service that we are providing. And you also have to take into consideration the rebound effects. So that is the red box there. So that is, without going deep into it, it's like emissions that occur in the system, like as a secondary effect of the things that you are doing. Maybe you're changing something in a system, but that there are other effects on other parts of the system where emissions occur that kind of takes out the effect that you're having. I will get back to that, so maybe it will clarify a little bit. I think many of you know about rebound effects, the basic principles of it. And then you take all these boxes and you put numbers on it, and you get the net avoided emissions, the dark green arrow there, which is the impact that's results from you putting your product on the market. And this graph is from the Mission Innovation. They have done a lot of work on this, and if you want to dig deeper into this, you can go to the MI solutionframework.net, and you can download this report and a lot of other really helpful material. So you can read more into it, and you can also contact us, and we cannot help you do the calculations, but we can for sure point you in the right direction, at least, and do our best to help. So if we can move over to the next slide. So why is this important then? Well, as Örjan said, it's a crucial part of claiming that you have an impact and that you are an impact company, or that you are an impact investor. A quite clear example it was from a work we did with the Swedish Energy Agency. It was a couple of years ago now, but we used this sort of methodology that I just talked about, and applied it to a portfolio that they have, where they had around 50 startups that they were supporting. And they were quite sure that, well, all of these are really great companies who did a huge climate impact. And well, what we found was that, sure, these are great companies for various reasons, but the actual impact or potential climate impact varies quite a lot from the companies to the far left in the graph that could have a huge impact, and the one on the right side that, well, it probably wouldn't have a lot of climate impact if they would succeed on their market. So it's really clear that if you want to have an impact, you should focus probably on the companies to the left in the graph, but that's also not really showing the full picture, because on the right-hand side, you might have companies that are enabling companies that Örjan talked about, that enables the one to the left that maybe are crucial for them to succeed. or maybe it's companies that has other impacts than climate. Maybe they are great for whatever, reducing plastics or increasing biodiversity, or maybe just creating job opportunities or revenue or whatever. It's I mean, there might be many good reasons to support those companies as well. And the main message is that you should do your homework and have this image clear for you, so that you know why are we supporting this company and so on. We can move over to just a really quick example how this sort of calculation can be done. This is a really simplified example where we imagine a new type of radiator that is heating buildings, but it only uses 80% of the energy used from a normal radiator. And to do the calculation, we need to know, well, how big is the market for this? And we happen to know that at least a couple of years ago, it was around 6,000 terawatt hours annually on a global level for residential heating. And we need to know also how much are these emitting? Well, as a conservative estimator, we use natural gas here and the emissions that you can see there in the red. And then you just basically put this in the formula. This is the same as the colored boxes that you just saw, only put it into a mathematical equation. And you make up some kind of market share. How big part of the market can this innovation take in a couple of years? And you put the numbers together, and you get a total number. In this case, if you one more slide, there you get 60 million tons of annual CO2 reduction. And of course, this is super simplified, but in some cases, if you are in an early level startup, this might be enough just to get the first feeling of, is the thing that we're doing, is that something that could potentially have a big impact? And then as you go along, as you continue developing your business, you will of course learn more about the market. Maybe you can divide it into different sub-markets and regions, and you will do some piloting and get some real data, and you can refine this calculation over time and get deeper understanding on what it is that you're doing and the potential impact from that, and also try to figure out how can you increase it even further. But doing this kind of basic calculation, that at least helps to get a first understanding of can we get a big impact from this. A second example, which is maybe a little bit more complicated and maybe a little bit more related to real life examples, is these electric scooters seem to be everywhere now. Then when summer is coming, and at least here in Stockholm where I live, we see them everywhere. And if you do a calculation on the impact of this, well, first of all, you have to look at the blue box with the solutions emission and do some kind of simplified or full life cycle assessment. And you would look at the production emissions, the electricity during usage and the maintenance and so on. And then you would look at enabling effects. What happens when you put this on the market? Maybe they reduce car traffic. I haven't really seen any strong evidence for that in Stockholm, but maybe that is the case in some cities around the world. And maybe at least a few people would do a few less car travels per year or per week or so on. But then also you have the rebound effects, of course, to take into account. Maybe I with actually quite a lot of people who uses these electric scooters. They were previously walking by foot or going by bicycle, so that might actually even reduce emissions, because for sure these have higher emissions per walking distance than walking, and probably also compared to a bicycle, because the scooters use electricity, and from what I heard, they don't really last so long, but rather it has to be, there's a lot of maintenance for these. So quite hard to find good numbers on this. Hopefully it will come and we will figure out, and you can calculate how, in which way this could be a climate innovation and the impact it could have. But maybe more interesting, I think, is to, if you want to be a impact company and have climate impact, then it doesn't really stop there. But you rather have to think, well, if we not having a big impact today, what can we change in our product or business model? Maybe these scooters don't have an impact at the moment in Stockholm, but maybe there are things you can change. Maybe you can pull up with other resources, with a local commuting company and others, and you can offer some kind of mobility package, which makes it even much more attractive to go by public transport. So I think that's the main message here, is you don't really, you just don't, you calculate once and then you settle, but also you keep evolving, as all startups do, and see what can we change to increase impact over time. So finally, as an additional perspective on this that might be helpful for some of you to keep in mind. You all know the waste hierarchy. I think it's been around for some decades now, and has been used for a lot of good things. And what it basically says is that if you want to tackle a problem like waste, you should start high up in the hierarchy. That's the best way to have an impact and to be responsible as a company or organization of some sort. You don't start just with the recycling, because it's much more impactful if you prevent waste from even happening at all. So this is a way to keep track on solving the right problems. And there are a few other similar hierarchies that have been developed throughout the years on other sectors, and they kind of tell the same story, that you should prevent and avoid the problem before you kind of take care of the symptoms of it. And this is very useful for organization and companies. But if you are a solution provider, which most of you on this call today are, if you're a startup or scale up, you don't really have that type of problem, but because you're trying to solve someone else's problem. So the message here would be if you want to be successful and have impact, you should focus your solutions towards other organizations' hierarchies, and to try to deliver as high up as possible into those hierarchies, because that's where you will solve the right problems and you will be most impactful. If you skip forward, you could kind of boil this down to a hierarchy for solution provider, which is something that we are looking into, if this is something that would be useful to develop more in detail. So this is a kind of a work in progress for us, and we hope to get back to you in the future, maybe have some better kind of framework maybe that can be useful for this. Because if you show the last slide, Örjan, as I said, it's important to aim high in the hierarchy if you want to have a good impact, and it's also important to keep in mind that you don't do something that creates lock-in effects. If we get too good in a society to tackle the symptoms, then we maybe will not take care of the root problem. If you're too good at taking care of the recycling, then maybe we don't focus enough on the actual waste. So this is important because we don't have a lot of time, so we really need to tackle the root problem. And finally, as we've been saying, also do the math. If you calculate this, you will probably find that the higher up in the hierarchy you're targeting with your solution, the biggest emission volumes you can mitigate. So yeah, I think that's all we had, and we have a few minutes now for questions.
Thank you, Johan and Örjan, for a great and very informative presentation. I think there are many very hands-on tools and frameworks that hopefully the startups and companies can use straight away, and to deepen their reasoning as well around their own solutions. So we do have a question in the chat, and it's for you, Johan. So is it hard to find data regarding the size of the potential market, or are there global databases to help you with that?
Well, it is a bit tricky. There are not really any good databases on a like overall level, but it kind of depends on what sector you're targeting. In some cases, there can be quite good data availability, and the more you focus, I guess, on your product and your offer, the more data you will find. In some cases, you can also buy quite expensive, but maybe worth it to buy like this analysis that some yeah, can be provided for a cost. So, but there, I don't know of any good open databases on a general level. That of course would be great to have.
I can just add that, and also since it's that difficult to estimate the market and especially what market share could you achieve, and what the calculation usually look at is not how big market share could you as a company achieve, like 20% of global market. That is huge. It's more your innovation, this type of new solution. How much could that be, replacing the current market? So that's more the potential of the innovation than the potential of your specific company. But it still does say something important. So I just want to again stress that what we tried to convey here is that you can make a difference if you try to look closer at the problem you want to solve with your innovation, solving the best type of problem, so to speak. What Johan mentioned here is that something called the Jevons paradox is that if you do make things more efficient, for instance, energy usage, if you make things more efficient, we just start to use more energy. So the total net effect may not be as good as we hope. So again, that is why it's important to try to really be high up in this hierarchy and look all the way on what type of problem you address. Yeah.
Yep. Thank
Thanks.
you for that nice wrap up and a strong message at the end. And with that, I will welcome our next speaker, which is EVL.
Yes, and then I will start. We will talk a little bit about green financing, and I hope we can see the presentation mode now. And it will be me and my colleague Nora Fischer who will talk. I will first briefly go through the green investment trends, and then Nora will continue to talk a little bit about possible EU findings that are directed to innovative companies, technology companies in the early stages. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about state-of-the-art analysis that we think is really important to be successful with getting financing. But if we look at these green investment trends, I've been working with clean tech and in green technology companies for 25 years, and I would say the last 3 years have happened more than during the 2 past decades before. And that could be seen in these figures. This is the global climate tech venture funding that has skyrocketed the last few years. and it's even surpassing what's called before the clean tech boom in 2007 to 2011, and it's different now. Now it's more integrated into the industry, and it's also integrated into the policy. And just to show one example of what has kind of triggered this investments, I can give you the example of, for example, the price of EU emissions allowance. And EU actually have taken the lead here globally when it comes to policy. And European Union are the largest driving force now for the change into a zero carbon society. As you can see, around 2020, the carbon emission rights rose in price radically, and there is a trend. You can see that they will continue to rise. This year, Fit for 55, where policy program was decided, which means that you have even stricter rules. You will expand the emission allowance program to other areas. You will add on later on even trade fees and so on carbon and so on. So it's really happening a lot, especially within the European Union, and that triggers investments. And of course, the geopolitical situation have even triggered even more with high energy prices, high gas prices. But the question is actually, EU has the lead that can be seen here in the figure to the right. You see different transversal technologies, 10 of the top ones that we talk about, AI, automation, and so on, future programming. And here, McKinsey have made an assessment of what regions are in the front line. As you can see, Europe are in the front line when it comes to the next generation of materials and future clean tech. But the question is, can we keep this lead? Last year, US made the largest federal climate change investment in American history. And we can also see that China actually are spending huge amounts in investments in solar, wind energy, and electrical vehicle and batteries. And actually, most solar cells are produced in China today. So this have kind of evolved just in a few years from not only being a climate issue. Now it's an industry issue. It's a trade issue. It's an economic issue to be within this green race. And this has shifted the possibilities. And another shift that has happened is that compared from before, there are not so much hands-off from the public sector. We can see that European Union now is going in with heavy both grant and investments, even venture investments. And Nora will talk a little bit, my colleague Nora, who works at EU SME Support, where we support different companies to apply for EU. And you will talk with some of the programs that are tailor-made for companies that having new innovation technology. So I'll leave over to you, Nora.
Yes, thank you for the introduction, Andreas. I will just, so I guess you can see the presentation now, right?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. Yeah, my name is Nora, and as Andreas said, I'm representing the program EU SME Support, and I will use the time I have now to present some EU funding programs to you so that you can get an idea of what kind of EU funding you can apply for. And not all companies are solely for, not all programs I will go through are solely for clean tech companies, but funding clean tech is an important part of these programs. And yes, Andreas showed it before that Europe right now still has a lead when it comes to clean tech. But before I dive into the different funding programs, just shortly about the SME support that I'm working for. The SME support is funded by Tillväxtverket, Vinnova, and the Swedish Energy Agency, and is a network of 20 people from different organizations, and the goal is to increase the number of successful applications for financial support from EU framework programs for SMEs. Yes, and here you see that we are spread around the whole country, and have different industry competences as well in the program. And here you can see the programs that we support listed according to what TRL level they approach. So TRL stands for technological readiness level, and describes the maturity of technologies. So you see here that there are programs starting with basic technology research, and then we have also funding programs going up to TRL 9, where systems are proven in operational environments. And I will focus on the programs Eurostar's EIC Accelerator and Innovation Fund today, which you see approach higher TRL levels, and I think are most relevant for you. Yes, I also want to highlight that there are a lot of funding programs available, but yeah, I will go through the ones I just mentioned, and that we also provide support for in the SME support. And yeah, just shortly what we can support with in the EU SME support, we have the workshops at events where we go into detail with the different funding programs. We can also read applications and give feedback on them. We're not allowed to write applications for you though. And yeah, if you want to get support with your application, or just want to discuss one-to-one which funding program that could fit you, you're welcome to contact our help desk, and we will connect you with the right expert in our team, and the support is cost-free. But yeah, with having said this, I will dive into the programs and what it means applying for them, and I will start with the EIC Accelerator. The EIC Accelerator is a funding program for knowledge-intensive and high-tech SMEs with innovative technology and international ambitions. So here, yeah, you can really think deep tech, disruptive innovations, and unicorns, just to give some buzzwords. And the program aims to close the funding gap illustrated here on the right side, where risks for private investors are too high, but when this risk is passed, then the company really has the potential to become a market leader. And yeah, the EIC Accelerator has courts that are open to innovative technologies in all areas, and then you also have challenges. You can see the challenges for this year here, and as we're talking about green financing, I want to highlight the challenge about energy storage and new European Bauhaus, new European Bauhaus, that is digital products or solutions that enable the construction sector to achieve climate neutrality. So digital twins, 3D printing. And some examples, and yeah, the duration of an EIC Accelerator project is 1 to 2 years, and you can apply as a single SME. Also, mid-caps can apply, but only for the funding option investment only. I will go through this in a second. And here, applicants must come from a EU member state or a Horizon Europe associated country. And here we have the different funding options. You can receive up to 2.5 5 million euro of grants for activities from TRL 5 to 8. And there you can get a cost coverage of up to 70%. And then you can also get up to 15 million of equity investments where the European Commission goes in as investor via the EIC fund. So yeah, you have different alternatives here. You can apply for the grant only or the grant first, or also a blended finance where you apply for a mix of grant and equity. And yeah, here we have the application process, and first you do short application, then if you pass this you go through a full application, and if this is approved you're also invited to jury interview. And here are the cutoff dates for this year as well. Yes, and with this I will move on to the next program that we also can help you with applying for in the ESME support, and that is Eurostars. And you may be reminded this, Eurostars aims to help companies from TRL 5 to 7 approximately. So it's really getting research ready for the market, and it supports international R&D and collaborative innovation projects. Yeah, the program aims at the development of new products, processes, and services. And yeah, collaboration is quite central to the program, that you, together with the partners, explore new market opportunities, and projects must be completed within 36 months, and then market introduction should be within 2 years. Then there are some certain regulations for pharmacy and medtech. And Eurostars is a collaboration between 37 countries, and in order to apply for Eurostars you must have parts from at least 2 participating countries in your consortium, and the coordinator of the project must be an SME. And yeah, important is also that different countries have different funding and application rules, and for Swedish parties Vinnova pays out the fund, and Vinnova's requirement is that SMEs have at least 2 registered annual reports when they apply. Yes, for Eurostars projects you can get up to 5 million euro for the whole project, but also important to mention the Swedish part can get a maximum of 5 million Swedish crowns, and the grant can cover up to 50% of the SME's budget, and funding can be received within 7 months from the application. And yes, we have 2 application dates per year, and you get quite quick feedback within 3 to 4 months, and 30% of the applicants actually receive funding, which is quite high rate. And the next cutoff is in September. Yes, and so I move on to the last program I think I will present to you, the Innovation Fund. And that is a bit different from the other programs. It is financed with revenues from the EU emission trading system, and it aims to fund innovative technologies and flagship projects in Europe that really can bring significant greenhouse gas emission reductions. So here we talk about a TRL level from 6 to 9. So you have a technology demonstrated in a relevant environment and take the steps towards commercialization. And yeah, the project, the sectors that the Innovation Fund is focusing on our renewable energy, CCU, CCS, energy intensive industry, and energy storage, and applicants can apply in on their own or as consortia. And there are usually 2 calls per year, as you see here, 1 large scale and 1 small scale. And when you apply for the Innovation Fund, you have to do greenhouse gas emission calculations according to the Innovation Fund's template, which is quite complex. And then, proposals are evaluated with a cascade assessment where you need to pass the first criteria to go to the second and so on. And here you can get cost coverage of up to 60% for large-scale projects. It's both for capital and operational costs. For small-scale projects, only for the capex. And an advantage here is that you can combine this with other forms of public funding. For example, if you have regional or national funding programs that you also get grants from. And up to 40% of the grant is paid after financial close when all the agreements have been signed, and then the remaining 60% are paid after financial close and against greenhouse gas emission avoidance. So here you really have to follow up that you achieve the emission avoidance that you calculate in your proposal. And the payment here is related to that. Yes, and there's an ongoing small scale call which closes in September. And lastly, I also want to show you some national funding programs by the Swedish Energy Agency. That may be relevant when you're not mature to search for Innovation Fund yet. So they have programs for concept development, where you get funding for developing your business concept, and also funding for testing, verifying, or validating your solution together with the customer. And then the industrial leap, Industriklivet, where they fund the pilot and demonstration projects. So that was a bit about EU funding programs. And with that, I will hand over to Andreas again, who will present a methodology I think can be quite relevant for when you're applying to such programs.
Yes, and I will share my slide as soon as you stop sharing yours, because you are blocking my sharing.
Yes.
It's different from Teams, where you can override.
So now you should be able to share.
No, it says still that you're sharing. Will you stop sharing? Yeah, now it was a little bit slow. Yeah, now. So now I hope you see me in presentation mode, and I will talk a little bit about state-of-the-art analysis. And the question is, why state-of-the-art analysis? Why I'm talking about this when it comes to financing? And we've been working many years with supporting companies to apply for European Union fundings, and also helping with other types of investment. And we see kind of one thing that comes again and again, and that actually is one of the weakest part that usually are in an application or in a business plan, is this state-of-the-art analysis, that you show that you know what's going around in the world around you to your technology. And too many times we have seen this. We have an innovation that is so unique that it has no competitors. And I would say that's really no if you make an application or if you go to a financer. What you want to see is this. There are several competing technologies, like for example, X, Y, and Z, but our technology is superior because. This gives more and more confidence that you really have done your research. You show the investor or the reviewer of your application that you know the field and that you know what's out there, because it's always competitor, or at least there are substitutes. And you have a customer perspective because you know that the customer can find another way to solve the issue than you, even if you really have a unique technique. So this is important. So we have, during this Omställningslyftet that was mentioned before, been looking at coaching in state-of-the-art analysis, and we have EVL are in developing a training concept consisting of 3 coaching sessions where our experts help your company make a technology front analysis, state-of-the-art analysis. And the starting point is to combine your market and technology know-how with IVL's know-how about change, the research front, and the trends. And how do we do it then? Well, we are using PatSnap, which is a world patent database with more than 130 million patents. And this PatSnap has analytical tools such as an AI text for analysis and patent landscape analysis. This we use together with the EC database for projects granted by EU, listing about 1,500 frontline European innovation projects. And together we use these sources and other sources. The data is analyzed by our innovation and environmental technology experts at IVL. And I will show you some example what you can get out of looking at patents with the tools from PatSnap. For example, you can look at technological trends. This is an example of robot development in agriculture sector, which you can clearly see here that this is China suddenly around 10 years ago started to develop pretty rapidly here. And that has peaked a little bit, but still China is dominating this. You can also investigate the potential markets. Once again, the example of robot development in agriculture, and you examine these markets by looking at the country of origin of the patents, and then you also look at the potential target markets by looking what markets have the patent maker filed their patents for, and that gives an indication what all these different patent holders are aiming, what kind of markets they are aiming for, and it gives clear indication of this. And as you can see in this example with the robot, it seems like the ones who have made the patents are focusing on their home market. Like you see, the Chinese patents are only patents for China. Even the Japanese and Korean ones are also only patented in Korea and Japan. So it seems for this particular technology, very few see or aiming for a global market or a larger market. And this is one way you can use this tool. You can also analyze one industry sector, how the landscape look in an industry sector. This example is trucks in Sweden and the development of autonomous vehicle. And the way you're going to read this landscape is that it's like when you see peaks, there is a cluster of many patents in that technological area. So here you can see like a white peak is even snow on it. And here is a program, computer steering, identifying positions, and so on. You can see the red and blue dots. In Sweden, we have 2 truck manufacturers, Scania and Volvo. And you can see that red ones, you can see a hill over here where it seems like Scania is only developing, but not Volvo. So these are things you can reveal by looking at landscapes. Another example, a final example, could be looking at analysis of customer and competitors, what they focus on, what are their technological development focus. And here it's an example with Husqvarna. And you can really clearly see here that they have a really clear focus on grinding machine blade, clearing a robotic tool. That's what they are actually developing right now. So these are some examples of what you can get out from a state art analysis using patents. So what we are doing, we have a coaching process where we have 3 steps. We start with a kickoff meeting where you describe your business idea and products and services and technology areas that affect you, as well as the technology trends you're already aware of. And based on that, we set goals for the coaching and identifying which area IVL should investigate, where the technology front may lie, or where the state of the art is. We then have, after a couple of weeks, a conciliation meeting where IVL reports what we have arrived at. We have done some investigations in this initial investigation, and together we go through and discuss the results, and you give us feedback on whether the analysis has landed correctly, or we need to supplement or do some other things. And then finally, we have a final meeting that we together go through the supplementary survey. We discuss how the company should use technology trends and meet technological shifts. So we talk more strategically with you how this can be used, for example, for applications. So, as I said, we have developed this, or are developing, we are still trying with in this Omställningslyftet, but this program is now in the final phase. The project stops in August. So we cannot, unfortunately, not take on any more coaching now, but we are looking for continuation, and we're discussing with for example, Ignite here, if we can continue this. But if we're going to continue with coaching in the state of the art, it depends on the interest, of course, among startups. So if you found this interesting, please send me an email. We can't promise anything now, but it's good to get an indication that this is interesting, and then we can see if we can find a way forward to continue with this kind of analysis. So I think I stopped there.
Thank you, Andreas and Nora. I for sure learned a lot from your presentation. You know what the role of public funding is in this very complicated landscape, and also that IVL is a very good partner in writing these applications and getting access to the available funding. So now I would like to open up the floor to our listeners. Do you have any questions based on the presentation we just heard?
Örjan, I have a question. Just curious about the when you tried this in this project Omställningslyftet. Could you say some examples? Did you find some good, new ways forward or new insights in some of the cases there?
Yes, we're actually looking at a company right now where we are trying to actually help them to see where the competing technology, actually they had the patent, but they're moving into another area. That's what usually happens when you develop. You find new things. And now we're seeing if there will be some areas that are not covered, and what kind of substitution, what other ways to solve the same problem is. So that's one example. We are also actually looking, and that will be a report from Omställningslyftet. We're also looking at hydrogen, because that's really a hot topic now. And we're actually looking now on Sweden's position when it comes to patents in hydrogen. And that's not so nice reading. We will probably be a big hydrogen nation in Sweden, because we have hybrid, and we will build this big plant for hybrid, but we don't have the technology. So that's the kind of some message I would say. Go for hydrogen technology. It has to be improved. All the value chain, supply chain, all from producing hydrogen to storing, and that's a big market. So if you have ideas there will be future, and it needs to be developed. So that's some examples.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? I see that Gösta Jonsson you have turned on your camera. Are you curious to make a comment?
No, I don't have any comments just now.
Okay. Well, then I will share my screen, and we can move on to the next part of the presentation here. So I will welcome Helene Taflin from Almi Invest to make some comments and talk a bit about how you work in the Green Tech Fund.
Well, thank you, Jenny. I get so happy to see all the knowledge and the support available for startups and scale-ups in Sweden. That's really impressive. I will maybe try to educate myself a bit more, I realize. So I'm Helen. I work for Almi Invest Green Tech, which is a thematic fund investing only in startups that could significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So this is very much into our core of what we do, both trying to already in the deal sourcing phase, try to calculate the potential climate benefits of such an innovation and solution. So that's kind of a initial criteria for us to actually even continue looking at the new deal flow, because we want to find the really big impact cases in such, and we also actually use, that's why I'm so happy to hear it from Johan, that we also use the avoided emissions framework to calculate the potential benefits. And of course, it's very hard for a startup to fully know the whole value chain and to understand their own impact in the value chain, and also the benefits their solution actually can bring in when used when their customers use their technology, etc. So of course it's very hard to actually make the right type of calculations, but I think it's still essential to start off with the information you have at that point, and that you try to revisit the numbers as you go, and the company grows. So I think that's even though it's difficult, I think it's still a very good homework, because it's also about when you scale these types of companies, it's so important that you don't scale something that's not sustainable in the long run, that you lock yourself into a value chain or solutions that are actually not really so great as you thought from the beginning. But as you mentioned there, Örjan, I think it's great to see that you also we try to push the companies that we meet to not go for how large market share that they can take, rather than looking at, okay, if we scale this business, how much, I don't know, products or licenses or whatever you sell or try to provide, it's rather linked to the number of components or licenses or whatever. So it's linked to your likely sales of the company, rather than saying that we want to take a 5% market share, because it's so far from when you calculate it, it gets so kind of far away from the company what the potential actually might be. So we try to really link it to the sales rather of the company than the total potential market potential. So very glad to hear that as well. Even though it's difficult for a startup, of course. And also we also view there's of course low-hanging fruit from impact that you can see today versus impact on the long term, and also enabling cases, of course. So we try to look at it from a mix, and also try to see the low-hanging fruits that can have impact today, even though they are maybe less of a revolutionary innovation, but still, if you can have a large impact today, we need to take measures today and the next 10 years, etc. So we can't only look at the really big solutions in some.
Now you're muted, Helen.
Yeah, that's my fault. I'm extremely sorry.
Sorry.
Right.
And if you look at it from a VC perspective, the kind of value that is linked to the business scaling, it also needs to be innovation that is scalable within rather short term. Otherwise, the value proposition is likely too far away to make it a interesting investment from a value perspective. Yeah. So, but this from an investor perspective, I think it's so important that we try to calculate and put the number to the climate or environmental impact. And I think we and all the startups and the whole community need to continue to educate and measure to make sure that all the funding that becomes available now is actually allocated to innovation that can significantly make an impact. So we don't greenwash. We try not to greenwash, but I mean it's all about. Of course, it's easier to maybe measure the greenhouse gas emissions. We have frameworks to do that, etc. But then it comes to water and biodiversity, etc., which are more difficult. But I think we need to continue to develop and educate ourselves to make sure that we allocate funds to the right innovations.
A follow-up question on that, because when we spoke previously, you mentioned that the next generation of the fund might have a slightly different direction, where you also focus on more like other environmental criteria, such as like water usage or toxins and so on. Can you say something about this trend and and how you look at it, and like what it means in terms of like for the startups out there?
Yeah, well, I think when our fund was set up, I think the whole ecosystem has kind of evolved around how we view sustainability and impact, or whatever you would like to frame it like. And that's of course when our fund started investing, the view of greenhouse gas emissions was maybe the big topic. I think it has evolved, and it's so of course interlinked with we can't if we don't succeed with biodiversity and clean water, etc., we won't succeed. It doesn't matter. We won't succeed with the greenhouse gas emissions as well. So it's all one small ecosystem that we need to take care of, and it's all interlinked. So I think there will be, of course, more funding and investments in other sectors outside what we call greenhouse gas emission companies, but but it's also more difficult to calculate and put a number on it. And that I hope will come more kind of solutions and frameworks to make it happen, to put a number on it, because it's important.
Mm. Well, interesting. I would like to open up the floor to anyone to comment and reflect. But before I do that, I also want to share this Menti link that we have created. So we're extremely happy to have you all here today, but of course we would like to get some feedback on the content and what you thought of this type of setup. So while we kind of open up the floor, please feel free to visit menti.com and enter this link, and there will be a few questions for you to answer. So you can choose to do it straight away or after we round off the webinar. Are there any other comments or reflections, either building on what Helen said or anything else we covered previously in the webinar?
I have another question, but okay, so I should. So when it comes to quantify outcomes, I think a very important key measurement is also the cost of abating or mitigating greenhouse gases, like how many, like Andreas was showing, that the carbon allowance from European Union is reaching €100 per ton. At the same time, there is a lot of solutions that can mitigate for even less than that cost. So that should really drive a strong investment and scale up of those technologies which are cheaper than the allowances. But since that is also increasing that cost, I think that one thing it would be interesting for companies to look and calculate that cost of mitigation that their product or service can provide. That should be a KPI that is very important. But it would be interesting to hear from maybe Helen or Andreas. How do you think this the increase of these allowances, that cost, how can that push the investments to those mitigation technologies?
Well, I think that's really pushing. I think that's the strongest push, since we're working in a market economy. The price signal is the strongest, and you see the development that I showed, that when these emission trading system, the price went up immediately, the capital went to this sector. And now we are adding other things. For example, this autumn, European Union will add an auctioning system for hydrogen, which is kind of support new hydrogen technology, and then I think it will do a lot. So they are adding instruments, and China have also similar allowance systems. So I think that's a strong thing, of course. But there's a tricky thing that's Helen talked about here. The other important issues like biodiversity, that's coming more on the horizon, but it's more difficult to see how you have the economical incentive for that for them. But that's really important. I mean, they are important questions.
Right. Well, maybe that would be our last words, because we have reached our time. I want to thank all of the speakers that have been with us today and the audience for your participation. And lastly, we really welcome you to visit the Climate Startup Map, of course, and leave your opinion and feedback in the Menti. And we have also added a newsletter, like you can sign up for our newsletter in the footer of the website. So if you thought this was great, and want to keep track of upcoming initiatives and activities, please do sign up there as well. So a warm hand for everyone, all the speakers here, and thank you, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.